Hi, everyone. Welcome back to CELPIP Live. My name is Kimsa, and I am so excited to be your host for Season 4. It's going to be so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us on CELPIP Live today. We always like to start each episode with some trivia. So here's your very first trivia question this season. Do you know what the highest temperature Canada ever recorded is? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIPLive, and we may feature it on our feed. I'll definitely remember to reveal the response at the end of the segment. But for now, let's start our show. If you're new here, CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand more about the CELPIP test. If you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. If you have any friends, family members, or know anyone else who's studying for the test as well, do share our channel to them as well so they can have the support. We are kicking off Season 4 strong with discussing Speaking Task 4. And Brandi is back and ready to guide you on making predictions. So let's go say hello to Brandi. Hello, Brandi. How are you doing?
I'm well. Hi, Kimsa, and welcome to CELPIP Live. I'm so excited to be able to do this season with you. So welcome onto the show. We've got some people already in the comments box saying hello and welcoming you too. It's a very friendly audience we have, so you'll feel
That's so sweet. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Brandi. And I'm so excited to do my very first episode with you as well. I'm really happy that you're here and back to join us.
Me too. Yeah, we all had a small summer break and now we're back at it as well. And your trivia question today was very apt because we're going through a very small heat wave in Vancouver, where I live anyway, and across Canada and parts of the world. So I'm curious to see what everybody's guesses will be about the hottest temperature in Canada. Some of our comments already say about 45, 43. I'm going to guess 40 just to be different. So I'll put that on record. And I guess you'll tell us at the end who's close.
Yeah, I mean, I am also really excited to see. I feel like the numbers are just getting higher and higher, sadly. But yeah, I hope everyone is staying cool as they can, but also take some time to enjoy the sun. But yeah, super excited to have you here, Brandi. I'm going to let you get started for the people watching. If you have any questions, please write it down in the comments below, as mentioned, and Brandi can answer it after the lesson. So Brandi, you're up.
All right, thanks so much, Kimsa. So as Kimsa introduced, we will be doing one more speaking task today, looking at task 4, which is all about making predictions. We've had some special requests before our summer break to help this one. So this is why we're starting with it today. Before we get into some practice today, I just want to quickly introduce the CELPIP speaking test for those of you that are a little bit newer to the format. So there are 8 tasks altogether you will complete during the test itself. And every single time you start a new speaking task, you will have a short amount of time to prepare or to think of your ideas, and then you'll be asked to speak out loud. When you do speak, I can reassure you that you're actually sitting at your own computer station all by yourself. You're wearing a headset with a microphone attached. So when you speak into the microphone, you're simply recording your response out loud. Those recordings will be listened to later on by the raters, who will then give you a score based on what they hear. So you're never going to face a human examiner at any time during the CELPIP test. And I think that's reassuring, as some of us get quite nervous when we're asked to speak, especially if it's in our second language or additional language. Now, every single speaking task you complete for CELPIP will assess a different type of communication, a different skill. So task 4, as you can see on this chart here, is all about making predictions, which means guessing what's going to come next in a picture. If you look to the right, please, in the little time columns, you'll see that for this task, you're given about 30 seconds to quickly look over the question, look at the picture, start thinking of your ideas. And when it does come time to speak, you'll be speaking for a full 60 seconds. So knowing that ahead of time is going to help you know how much time you'll have for how many ideas. So when you do task 4, you're always going to see a picture, something like this. It'll be like a hand-drawn cartoon, and the instructions never change. They always say, in this picture, what do you think will happen next? So that's the future prediction. Every single speaking task will quickly remind you up here in the corner how much time you have to think, how much time you have to speak. And when you get to the screen, when you begin your task, this preparation time clock is going to start counting backwards immediately. So it will start at 30, and it will take 30 seconds then, of course, to get down to the 0 mark. So again, as this clock is counting backwards, your sole task is to look at the picture on the screen. You're going to select, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 different people or different parts of the scene, and just become really familiar with what these people are doing and what you think they might do next. That's how you're going to use your preparation time. Some people like to take a few short notes. You are given paper and pen during the test after all, but 30 seconds goes by very quickly. So at the very most, you might write down a couple of strong vocabulary words that come to your mind. But again, I think if you use that time to just pick the people that you have the vocabulary to discuss, that might be a better use of time. Now, in today's episode, what I'd like to do is actually present for you a structure or a strategy about how to get started with this task. So we're going to learn today how to specifically identify each person in the scene that we wish to talk about. And then from there, we're going to use our imaginations to predict what we But once you get practiced and you get the hang of predicting and making ideas very quickly, you'll then want to time yourself, because before you take the real test, you'll need to make sure that you can actually make your selections in 30 seconds and then fill 60 seconds of talk time. Before we start with our structure, I do want to remind us that the raters are listening. So the very first category of skills that they're listening for when you make your recording is all about your content details and your coherence. Is going to help boost your score in this area. Now, don't worry about trying to fit a rule or a mold. There's no rule whatsoever that says you have to talk about 5 people and you must make 10 predictions to get level 9 on your speaking task. That's not at all correct. I think instead what we'll do is select a person, talk about them, talk about what they might do next. If you can make even 2 or 3 future predictions about that one person before you move on to the next person in the scene, you're going to fill that time wisely. And again, you're not worried about fitting in a certain number of people. You'll just talk until that 60 seconds of time is up. So provided you've spoken about more than one part of the scene, you'll be fine. And if you want a guideline, I'd say 4 to 5 different parts of the scene. Again, you don't have to, but that's on average a good goal to at least start for. The quality of your ideas will be enhanced with more specific detail. So the more descriptive language you can use, the better for this response. And you'll see practice of that as we go through today's example. The coherence part of this skill, by the way, is all about organizing yourself. So it becomes almost routine. You'll introduce the person first that you're going to be talking about in the scene. You'll identify them, and then you'll make several predictions likely about them. And then you'll move. Somehow connect your ideas together. Response flows together, I think will be a lot smoother, and that's going to help your score. So let's start here for our practice, and I'd recommend you do this at home with your studying. So you've got 30 seconds, bear in mind, when you do the real test. So very quickly, you would look at the picture, pick your starting point. So usually we would select the person or maybe the group of people that we've already got some very strong vocabulary to use so that we're not struggling to know what to say next. So from that person, if you're looking at the top of the photo or the picture, you might want to then describe things working your way down to the bottom. If you're starting by describing the person on the left of the scene, then you might want to go ahead, move the action to the right. Wherever you start in the scene, you might want to start just describing the future actions in a clockwise fashion. Really, it doesn't matter how you organize yourself, but I do strongly encourage you to pick some sort of an organized pattern. It keeps you on track. It helps you connect ideas together and think of them more quickly as you speak. And it also allows the listener, which is the reader in this case, to follow the scene a lot more easily too. So make it easy on yourself and organize it before you get going. So the very first thing we're going to do, this is part one of your structure that we'll practice today, is again, we want to make it very clear which person in the scene we're actually talking about in the first place. So there's no doubt. So some elements you might want to draw in to this part of your response would be the age and gender of the person in question. If there's a job title that makes sense, I'd probably mention that too. So when I look at this scene, I notice most people seem to be regular community folk, but I see two people in yellow t-shirts and they look like they're working in these gardens. So if I want to talk about them and predict what will happen next, I'll probably identify them as maybe a maintenance worker or a groundskeeper or something to that effect. So the more specific you can be to identify these people, the better, more clear your answer will be. You can draw in the color of the person's clothing if you wish. I think the location in the picture is key. So is the person at the back of the park? Are they beside the fountain? Are they on the park bench? So drawing in these little tiny details, again, will just help anchor the scene. Now, we don't want to dwell on what these people are doing right this moment, because that's what we did already in task 3 for speaking. Task 4 asks us to make future predictions. But I think before we can move to the future, we have to identify briefly what this person is doing right now. So what is the current action? So I'm going to present for you a structure that you can try out at home. This is just one way to approach the scene, but see if it works for you. Let's practice by using this woman at the back here, the one in the red shirt. Okay, so if this was my actual test and I wanted to predict what she's going to do next, I want to start off by identifying her very clearly. So I might say out loud into my microphone, the young woman wearing the red shirt who is taking pictures of the statues at the back of the park. So I've color-coded those 3 elements just to show us the different parts of this introduction. So in green, you can see just some very specific identification features, I guess. In blue, you can see what she's doing right now. And then in orange, I've explained where she is in the picture. So I don't want to go into any more detail about that because that's just introducing her. What I want to focus on is making those future predictions. This is the main point of task 4. So we're going to make a couple of different predictions, including this person. So if she's currently taking pictures of these statues at the back of the park, the very first logical prediction that comes to my mind would be that she will probably ask her husband to pose with the statues. So you see that man standing beside her in the blue shirt? I've just created that detail. I'm assuming for this response that they're husband and wife. It's okay to make up little details like that as long as they're logical and they support your description. So that's one future prediction that just seems to make sense. She will probably ask her husband to pose with the statues. You'll notice the future verb tense here too, right? The word will is part of your verb. And when we make the future tense, we always use the word will. You'll be using that word all the way through your response, I'm assuming. So will ask becomes the main action. I included the word probably there in between the 2 words in the verb, because when you're making a future prediction, you don't know for sure if it's going to happen. It's just something that might happen or probably will happen or likely or possibly will happen. So you've got several different words that you can change in and out of your response. I went with probably for the first one. So if she's probably going to ask her husband to pose with these statues, logically, as I look at that part of the scene, I want to keep the action moving forward. Before I move over to a different person in the scene, I think I can make at least 1, if not 2 more predictions about them. So I think logically, after she snaps a few photos, the couple will likely take some selfies together and post them to Instagram. So effectively there, we've got 3 different future predictions about what this couple at the back of the park are going to do. So we've gotten the response started off on the right foot there with some structure. Now I'm going to open the structure up. We're going to then apply the structure with all of your help. I'm going to invite you to share some of your own creative ideas and your own future predictions if you'd like to type those ideas into our live chat box today. So we'll apply that to another part of the scene. But just before we do that, I want to remind us that there is another dimension, another skill set that the raters are going to be giving us a score based upon. So our vocabulary and our word choice is really important. So yes, we want to show off our wonderfully developed vocab. We want it to be interesting and high level and descriptive if we can, but we also need to make sure that the words we're using in our speech are natural and they make sense and they're easy to follow at the same time. We also are hoping to achieve a nice range of words. So you might have one or two high-level words, all right, but we don't want to just repeat those same words over and over again. So spending some time developing your vocabulary at home as you study will be helpful here. So you'll have lots of different descriptive ideas that you can include in the response. We also want to be very precise and very accurate as we talk about people in the scene. So again, here's what we've already said about the young woman and her husband at the back of the scene. You notice that when we speak of these people, we're actually using words like young woman and couple and husband. We're not saying the person, the person, the person. If we use very general and simple words like that, it's not very precise. A person could mean anybody in this scene at all. So the more specific and focused you are, the better it will be. Okay, so just one more reminder, you've got 3 predictions here we've already made about this couple. We've got the 3 predictions in red. We've got some future verb tenses here as well. So you will be using the word will throughout your response. You'll probably have a different word here before the main verb. So will probably ask, will likely take, will possibly take. Those kinds of words work well for future verb tense. You'll notice that our 3rd prediction here doesn't actually use the words will or likely, and that's because of the structure of the sentence. So we've already said we'll likely take some selfies together. The bottom idea means, and we'll likely post them to Instagram. But if we spoke that way and repeated those same words over and over, it sounds very repetitive and it gets really boring as well. So because we've used that little word and to connect these ideas together, it's understood that that last part of the sentence is following the same structure as above. So we understand that this is future tense, so we no longer need to add in will likely post. So that's why that one looks a little bit different. But all 3 of these ideas in red are future actions based on the scene. So with that in mind, again, let's take this structure and practice it together as a group. Now, keep in mind, please, I'll remind our whole audience that I can't see the live chat box as I'm presenting. So I'm going to invite you to share some ideas in the chat box. Kimsa can read out any ideas that come in and we'll move forward that way. So we'll see how this works for time today as well. Okay, so we're going to look at, I think it just makes sense to move the action down. If we started with this couple at the back, let's then go on to these children right below them. So the 2, I'll just do the first one, it's super fast. I can't think of many other age words that make sense. So the 2 young children, if we started off identifying them that way, can I invite all of you, please, to try to describe their location as precisely as you can? So where are they in the scene? We know that the couple is at the back of the park beside the statues. How would you describe these 2 young children? So again, I'll open that up to the live chat box there, and we'll see if Kimsa can share any ideas that might come in. So I'll give you just a bit of time to think it through as well. You'll have about 3 or 4 words, I'm guessing anyway, maybe even 5. Depends how detailed you get.
All right, so we don't have any yet. We're just gonna wait for a few more seconds to see if anyone has anything.
There's also a little bit of a lag as well. So there's a bit of a time lag, so we have to account for an extra about 10 seconds or so by the time people hear the question and then they start typing. So we'll give a little time. We won't spend too long. And it's okay if you don't have ideas to share. We don't need them, but nice.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I have an answer. So someone said near the fountain.
Perfect. The 2 young children near the fountain. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, you could say it that way. I chose to decide to put them in the center of the garden. Either way. So again, the whole point of sharing ideas like this today is you're going to see there are so many different ways you could describe the scene. There's not always one right answer. Sometimes there is, but in this case, if you said near the fountain, that's okay. My only concern with near the fountain is that near could be sort of in a larger area. So by saying in the center of the garden, maybe we've got the more precise there. This next part, the current action, I'm hoping is also we can get some participation here. How would you finish the sentence if you were describing these people and what they're doing? So the two young children in the center of the garden who are, what are they doing right now? So again, I'll invite you to share some ideas, see how that goes. So finish that thought. Who are? Try to select a nice, strong action word, action verb. What exactly are they doing? Make it interesting. Make your language come alive in the imagination of the listener for this scene. What are the kids doing? I'm going to give you 10 seconds. And if we don't have any guesses, I might just go and share what I have.
Oh, okay. We do have an answer for you, Brandi. So someone said, who are catching butterfly?
Awesome. Catching is a nice strong word. I had something very similar, but it's pretty much the same idea. So who are chasing butterflies is what I said. I added in with their nets just because that was one part of the scene I noticed. So that's exactly what you want to do. You're not overthinking this. Don't make it hard on yourself. For this, when you're just specifying who it is you're talking about, just describe what you're looking at and the words will flow smoothly, I hope.
Yeah, we actually have a lot. Sorry to interrupt, Brandi, but we actually have a lot of responses for this. Very similar ideas, like trying to grab flies. We had one that's discussing some games, running after butterflies, trying to catch them, catch the insects.
Perfect. So. Perfect. Yeah. And again, you just want sort of that one detail that's going to make it clear who you're talking about. So if I hadn't even seen this picture and I heard any of those ideas, I would imagine in my head what these people are doing now. So now that we know who we're talking about, this is now the most important part of our prediction. We need to come up with an action that they're going to do next. So can I invite you to share some creative ideas? You have to be logical. So something that might happen. So if they're currently chasing butterflies and they're near the fountain or in the center of the garden, what do you think they're going to do next? So these two children who are chasing butterflies with their nets will blank. And I'll open it up to see if we get some creative predictions here today. Finish this one off together and we'll go from there.
Okay, so we have someone saying we'll bump into each other and fall.
Perfect. And where are they going to fall? Can you extend that and be creative? And we'll fall, I'm thinking maybe into the fountain. That would make the scene come alive as well.
Fall into the pool?
Into the pool. Yeah, it's a fountain or a small wading pool. Sure, you got it. Good. Anything else that comes to mind? I like that, of these two kids bumping into each other. That makes perfect sense. Nicely done. If there's one more idea, we'll go with that. And if not, I'll share what I have right now. Yes. Okay. My idea isn't quite as creative as that, and I'll explain why in a second. There's a method to my madness. I just said that
actually, Brandi, someone said the exact same thing you wrote. We'll run around the fountain.
Perfect. We're on the same wavelength. The reason I went with that, I'll explain my thinking pattern. See if this works for you. When we're making these predictions, if you can somehow create a cause and effect scene, you're going to come up with ideas a lot more quickly on the spot as you speak out loud. So if we have these two kids bumping into each other and falling into the fountain, I feel like that part of the scene is finished. And then I sort of have to start fresh and decide if I want to talk about him or these people down here. Whereas if I have these two children running around the fountain, that's what we've created right now, eventually they're going to kind of encounter this man. So I really want these two children to have an interaction with this man to allow me to connect those predictions together. I really want him involved in my scene. So that's partly why I have them running around the fountain towards him, because I want to connect that. Now, before we continue on with these predictions, we're not done yet with these two children and that man. I do want to present for you the next dimension that the raters are going to be giving you a score based upon. So this is called listenability. Of course, your speech is really important. So on the real test, your pronunciation, your rhythm, your intonation, all of those things are important. We want to speak from beginning to end with few pauses, few interjections, and so on. I'm not going to worry at all right now about your speech delivery. That's something that you can practice another time at home. But what I do want to cover in this session today is looking at our sentence structure and making sure we've got some nice grammar and also a good variety. So we've got the one idea so far with these kids running around the fountain. I think that as they're running, they might start to get very excited, and I can imagine them shrieking loudly. Okay, so I've sort of finished off with them. If they're running around the fountain towards that man and they're making all sorts of noise, this is a perfect opportunity for all of us to draw him into the scene and to continue these predictions. So rather than call this person the man, that's really general, let's refer to him as a maintenance worker. And he is currently clipping the hedges nearby. I think that's more than enough to identify him. What do you think he's going to do logically? If these kids are running towards him and they're shrieking, yelling, shouting very loudly, look at the tool that he has in his hand. You know he's clipping those hedges. So what do you think he's going to do? How is he going to react? Can I invite some ideas from you today? So let's start the idea with will. That's our future verb tense. And we'd love to have an action. What is he going to do? So the maintenance worker who is clipping the hedges nearby will, you can think of a couple ideas even, possibly, with these two children. Okay, I'll keep an eye on my timer. Can we have some ideas in maybe about 10 more seconds? See how that goes. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Don't overthink it. Be logical about it.
Okay, so we have an answer come in. This person said he will try to stop them from coming closer to him.
Perfect.
And another one said he might warn them to be more careful.
Excellent. That's kind of where I was going with my scene as well. I liked the word might, and might warn them. That's a different way of creating the future verb tense. That's wonderful. Yeah. Any other ideas?
Yeah. Someone said the boy fell and accidentally caught the butterfly in his net. Both looked at each other and busted laughing. And the last thing I have here is he'll stop the work and safely put the working tool away.
Excellent. Okay, so you see how we're all using our own imaginations and taking the scene in completely different directions. There is no one right way to make these predictions. The ideas just have to make sense. That's all. So I went with sort of the whole scolding effect. I felt that if these kids were making lots of noise, if they were shrieking loudly, I thought that maintenance worker will become startled. That's a strong word to indicate he's scared or rather surprised by all that noise. And because I see he's got that tool in his hand and those leaves are falling on the ground, it gave me the idea that he might accidentally cut off some leaves. So in other words, he's going to damage that hedge that he's working to trim. And if that were the case, I mean, if I made a mistake at my job because of two children making lots of noise, I would probably be very, very upset with them as well and scold them. All right. So the two structures that we've got right now make a lot of sense. If this is step one, by the way, so as you're practicing at home, get your creative juices flowing and just predict logically the first logical idea that comes to mind. Once you've got the hang of that, you then want to start playing around with your structure just a little bit, because what we have on the screen makes sense, but it's just a little bit repetitive. We've used sort of the same approach or the same order of ideas to create these predictions. And remember, those raters want to hear a good variety. So I'm just going to read out loud what we have now, and you'll hear what I mean by repetitive structure. So currently it says, the two young children in the center of the garden who are chasing butterflies with their nets will run around the fountain and shriek loudly. The maintenance worker who is clipping the hedges nearby will become startled and accidentally cut off some leaves. So again, great vocab, logical ideas. I just want to change up the order of my ideas to give more of a variety. So I'll leave that first part about the children alone. Maybe that one at the bottom, we can just rearrange the order of the words. So the idea is the same, but I'm starting this time by the noisy squeals will startle the maintenance worker who is clipping hedges nearby, causing him to accidentally cut off some leaves. So this is sort of the next step to your practice at home. As I say, play around with your structures and try to make them slightly different if you can. And again, we'll end off by saying that this man will then likely scold the children, which some of you had already thought about. So I think we've given lots of detail about that part of the scene. If this was our real response, of course, we're keeping an eye on the clock. We have 60 minutes to fill. So we probably still have a good 15 or 20 seconds left on our timer. So I just want to sort of finish off with these children. I'll very likely have them run around, right? So in my head, they were probably going to come over here, get scolded. I just want them to run over here so I can somehow draw in these people to the scene. So I finished off with these kids getting scolded. I've invented the idea in my mind that these two people are the mother and the younger sister then of the two children. That just made sense to me to connect the scene together. So I just said they will run back to their mother and younger sister who are exiting the gardens on the path to the right of the scene. So again, I just sort of wanted them out of the response so I can move on to something new. And at this point, we've spoken about 4 parts of the scene. On average, we'll likely have time for one more. So I think it makes sense just to move that action down a little bit. We might as well talk about this groundskeeper because she's directly behind that mother and child. So this time, again, just to change it up a bit, why don't we start with the location? We haven't yet done that. So we can start by saying just behind this mother and child, the groundskeeper, it looks to me like she is trimming those shrubs shaped like 2 giant birds. That's what she's doing. Can I open this up again one final time? This is the last part of the response we'll do together. Can you provide for me several predictions about her if you're able? So again, on the test, as you're speaking out loud, recording this response, you're likely going to have to create your ideas on the spot. You're making them up as you talk out loud. So eventually we want to get to the point where we can rattle off, say, 3 or even 4 predictions in a row, like a sequence of events, a chain of events that this woman's probably going to do next. So I'll give you some time to think on that. Can I give you even 30 seconds? And Kimsa can read some of those ideas coming in, and then I'll demonstrate what it sounds like to put together 3 or 4 predictions right on the spot.
Okay, Brandi. So someone said will be pleased with her creativity and appreciated by the old couple sitting on the bench.
Fantastic. So you've again drawn somebody else into the scene. Old couple is very specific. There's only one old couple here. And on the bench allows me to identify immediately who you're talking about. Fantastic. That's exactly the way to go. Do we have any other ideas? Birds will. Yeah, you can focus just on the groundskeeper, or you can draw in somebody else if you wish. This will probably be towards the end of your response. So you might have, say, 10 seconds left on the clock. I'm just estimating based on the number of details we've had so far. So I'll give you 10 more seconds. Failing that, I'll go ahead and share with you some other thoughts. Okay, last call. All right. So can I demonstrate sort of what I'm thinking we could try at home? So we've got the groundskeeper trimming these shrubs shaped like 2 giant birds. I think she will finish the section she's working on, then stand up to stretch her legs. She'll continue reshaping the hedges and pull some weeds from the soil. Then she'll sweep up the trimmings to keep the pathways tidy. So again, this is sort of step 3 of your practice with this structure. There's no way you'll be able to think of all of those ideas in the earlier prep time. There's not enough time. So if you can get to the point where on the spot, you're looking at one part of the picture and you can rattle off 3, 4, or even 5 ideas that blend together like this, just to keep that action moving forward. That's kind of the ultimate goal, to fill that 60 seconds of talk time. All right, so this is a fine prediction all about this groundskeeper. One more tiny little element I'll mention. I know, again, I focus there just on those future actions, but because you're sequencing these events out, it makes sense to include these little tiny transitions of time, if you will. So I added in this little phrase in between. After a short rest, she'll continue reshaping the hedges. And by doing that, I've actually created a complex compound sentence structure. So those are little tricks you can practice and play around with at home once you get your ideas out. Okay, so I'd like to put this all together now. We're going to hear a speaker read out loud the scene that we've created with some of your input as well. We'll hear this response twice. And I think the first time we listen, if we could kindly look at the picture and follow along these ideas so that we're all very clear how the response comes together and is organized. All right, the second time we listen, we're going to follow a transcript just to double check that our future verb tenses are correct and that we've got lots of examples of strong vocabulary use and sentence structure. Now, bear in mind, please, this is not a real test taker speaking. This entire episode was a practice episode designed to help us study. So you're actually going to hear from me, a colleague of mine who will be kindly lending his voice to help us study with the scene. So this is actually Barry, who's our videographer, and he's responsible for putting us on to CELPIP Live this morning. And Barry is listening from home, so I'd like to thank him for lending us his voice talents today. All right, let's listen to Barry read aloud our practice response. Here we go.
The young woman wearing the red shirt who is taking pictures of the statues at the back of the park will probably ask her husband to pose with the statues. After she snaps a few photos, the couple will likely take some selfies together and post them to Instagram. I imagine the two young children in the center of the garden who are chasing butterflies with their nets will run around the fountain and shriek loudly. The noisy squeals will startle the maintenance worker who is clipping hedges nearby, causing him to accidentally cut off some leaves. He will likely scold the children, so they will run back to their mother and younger sister who are exiting the gardens on the path to the right of the scene. Just behind this mother and child, the groundskeeper who is trimming the shrubs shaped like two giant birds will finish the section she's working on, then stand up to stretch her legs. After a short rest, she'll continue reshaping the hedges and pull some weeds from the soil. Then she'll sweep up the trimmings to keep the pathways tidy. It's a busy day in the gardens today.
Excellent. Nicely done, Barry. So again, on your real CELPIP test, you will be giving a score based partly on your pronunciation and your speech patterns. If you hadn't guessed it, Barry is from Ireland. So we've got that wonderful Irish accent to lead us through this today. I'm going to play his response for you one final time. As I say, we'll follow the transcript. Please just double check you know how to make the future verb tenses. And again, examine the vocab. It'll give you some ideas for the level of detail you'll want to practice inserting into your own ideas at home.
The young woman wearing the red shirt who is taking pictures of the statues at the back of the park will probably ask her husband to pose with the statues. After she snaps a few photos, the couple will likely take some selfies together and post them to Instagram. I imagine the two young children in the center of the garden who are chasing butterflies with their nets will run around the fountain and shriek loudly. The noisy squeals will startle the maintenance worker who is clipping hedges nearby, causing him to accidentally cut off some leaves. He will likely scold the children, so they will run back to their mother and younger sister who are exiting the gardens on the path to the right of the scene. Just behind this mother and child, the groundskeeper who is trimming the shrubs shaped like two giant birds will finish the section she's working on, then stand up to stretch her legs. After a short rest, she'll continue reshaping the hedges and pull some weeds from the soil. Then she'll sweep up the trimmings to keep the pathways tidy. It's a busy day in the gardens today.
Okay, so quick check. We've got our predictions here. These are all your future verb tenses. You'll notice most of them use that modal will that we talked about. So will probably ask, will likely take. This third one, though, I'll introduce it to you very quickly right now. You're welcome to borrow it for your own practice and your responses. When we say I imagine, so I imagine the two young children in the center of the garden chasing butterflies and so on. You're suggesting that you're looking ahead to the future in this way. So I think it's a nice little idea to insert because it creates more variety so that we're not just relying on that word will all the way through. We've taken great pains to create some different sentence structures today. And again, these 5 phrases here that I just circled for you, these are all the ones we're using when we're introducing a new person to talk about. So because it's a person, we're beginning that part of the description with the word who, and we're just giving a little sort of current action before we get into the future prediction. So who is taking pictures and who are chasing butterflies? These phrases, from a grammar standpoint, we call them relative clauses. And when you put one into the middle of your sentence, you're actually creating a complex sentence structure anyway. So they're good tools to learn. You just don't want to overuse them. So in this case, the only time we use them is to, again, introduce that new person. So we know what they're doing and then what will not logically come next. So that's complex. The other blue words on the screen are just showing different connecting words, different conjunctions that, again, create sometimes complex sentences, sometimes compound. So words like after, and, so, then, even that middle phrase, causing him to accidentally cut off some leaves. We were playing with the structure there just to make it more diverse. Okay, our vocab as well. I'm hoping this gives you some nice ideas about the level of description that you're invited and encouraged to apply, not just to this speaking task, frankly, but to any speaking task or writing task that you complete. You'll notice we started with a location, so at the back of the park, that's very focused, but just have a quick look at some of these strong action verbs. So words like pose and snaps a few photos. We talked about those photos being selfies. We'll post them to Instagram. The kids will shriek loudly, and those are noisy squeals, and they're going to startle, and so on. So all of these actions are very vivid. Again, your goal here almost, as you're making these predictions and telling your story, if you will, is to have the listener be able to imagine the action in their minds. And I think just by listening to this, even without a picture, we'd be able to follow that story along. And the last thing that Barry did for us here is he's added in a little teeny concluding sentence at the end. It doesn't have to be complex. You don't, again, have to overthink it, but it's very helpful when we're organizing ourselves to make it obvious to the listener that we're finished and we have no more future predictions to make. So this very simple sentence saying, "It's a busy day in the gardens today." Again, it's just a signal. We're done. Response is finished. Nothing more to add. Okay, it summarizes sort of what's happening in this scene. So that's the purpose for it. If you don't have time to add in a concluding statement, it's really not a huge problem. But if you've got an extra, say, 3 or 4 seconds to squeeze one in, I think that will help that organization, the way that the whole thing connects together. So we've talked about 3 skill sets the raters are examining, and the 4th one that will help them give you the final score for your answer is all about task fulfillment. So they're looking for a complete response. I think we've done that. We managed to speak about 5 different parts of the scene. We gave several predictions, even about each person that we spoke about. All of the predictions we made were very logical. They could happen. So that's what we mean when we say they're relevant. They're all on topic and they make sense in the scene. So we can check those first 2 items off the list. The tone is simply just the emotion that you're creating through word choice. And in this case, we're simply predicting what will happen next. So our tone is appropriate for the scene. There's nothing really more to add there. The length for the scene as well, when we finished off our response, when Barry spoke it out loud, it clocked in at about 59 seconds. So that's about as close as you'll get to the 60-second time on the test. So once again, when you're practicing at home, the first thing I would encourage you to try is just play around with the structures that we presented to you today. Don't worry too much about your time. In fact, don't worry about your time at all. Just understand clearly how to identify the person and make some logical conclusions. So once you're very comfortable doing that, then you'll want to actually set a timer and then deliver your response from beginning to end, because you need to feel what it's like to fill that 60 seconds. And you'll have a pretty good understanding by then how many people you're going to have time to speak about, and then how many predictions you'll have time to offer. It's different for all of us, depending on the level of detail. But you do want to come close to the 60 seconds here, give or take. And again, your final score then is based on all 4 of these dimensions together as a group. This is important. So when you're practicing at home, yes, you want to develop your vocab, and yes, you want to practice your speech delivery and so on. But we want to demonstrate strengths in all 4 of these areas. Please don't just, if you do really well in vocab on your actual test, that's great. But if your content details are simple, and if your speech is hard to understand and your answer is about 30 seconds too short, just because you scored well in vocab, but you did poorly in the other areas, doesn't mean you're going to get an overall high score. So to really climb that score chart and to achieve that higher level that I'm sure you're hoping for, you'll want to demonstrate strengths across all 4 of these dimensions. That's the way to climb that ladder, so to speak, and to get your level 9 or your level 10 or whatever it is you're aiming for. So just to wrap up here, so we can log off for the day. Speaking task 4, in the prep time, you can take a couple quick notes, but I think as long as you're just getting comfortable with that picture and selecting, say, 4 or 5 people that you've got some vocabulary at the ready that you can describe, I think that's great. When you start to speak, we practiced today just giving a couple of identifying features so we know exactly who that person is first. So we did draw in sometimes the age or the clothing or the job title. I think the location is always important, and we sort of took the current action so we could springboard it into what's going to happen next. So that seems to be a usable structure. this is where most of your content detail will come from, right? Making those predictions. This is where it's most important part of task 4. So by including several predictions about even one person, that's going to effectively use those 60 seconds of talk time. And it starts to become easier for you when you're looking at just that one person. Think of that groundskeeper trimming those bird hedges that we talked about at the end. We're looking at the picture and we're just rattling off, say, 3 or 4 things that might happen next. So that's kind of the end goal here. We want to practice to get to that level if we're able to. So we did connect our ideas together today, and some of you did well with that today in the live chat too. So we sort of started at the back of the park and we worked our way down and around. And all of the actions we were predicting led into the next person and allowed us to continue that story, always with those future reactions too. We did take the time to offer that very simple conclusion. So it's just a signal that we're done talking. And again, we took great effort to look at our vocab today. So always strong action verbs. I think that's really important for your prediction task. And where we can, we're adding in these adjectives and adverbs. We're using those prepositional phrases for locations, like near the fountain, someone said, on the park bench, someone said. All of these descriptive phrases are going to add interest and precision to your answer too. We definitely varied the vocab. We had several complex sentences and some compound and simple ones too. And last but not least, we didn't really get into the speech part of it today, but when you're practicing at home, I'd encourage you to record your speech. Use your cell phone and play it back. And you can judge for yourself if you're at a point where you're speaking fluently enough, moving that speech forward. We want to try to avoid long pauses. We try very hard not to say and ah too much, because that also will interrupt the flow. All right, so I'm going to end it there for now. I'm going to come back to you on the screen, and we'll maybe take my questions section off. There we go, perfect. So I'm back, and if you've got any more questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation, Brandi. That was so helpful. And I thought the whole interactive thing was really fun as well.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. I'll say to our viewers too, it's hard because we have a bit of a lag. So by the time I ask the question, I think there's about a 10 or 15 second lag by the time you hear it and type. So we try our best to draw you in as we can. And I'd like to thank you for your participation today. Those of you that offered up your ideas, you're all on the right track. So I'm glad that you're confident enough to share. And you also give each other ideas, right? Because the ideas I presented today, that's just one way to do it. There are so many different ideas you could draw into your speaking responses. So looking at other people's approaches will give you ideas too, things that you hadn't necessarily thought about. So I thank you for sharing those too. Mm-hmm.
Oh, we had someone ask in the comments earlier. They mentioned, I can't speak properly when I speak the task of CELPIP. I'm confused what I'm speaking about, so please help me with this problem.
Okay, that's a very big question. I'm not 100% certain what the main challenge would be. So if you're having a hard time speaking at all, it could be for a number of reasons. So first of all, it might be the sense that our vocabulary is still under development. So you're right, like it's really difficult on the spot. Look at what we did today, right? We have a picture, we have to make up ideas as we go, thinking very quickly to create this scene about what's going to happen next and next and next. We're not going to be able to do that very well until we have at least a foundational level of vocabulary so that we can identify people and objects. And we've got those verbs and actions that make sense. So if you're having a hard time speaking, it might be you just need some more vocabulary development. Once you've got the vocabulary underway, the next aspect becomes very quickly connecting those ideas together. It's the organization. That really comes with practice. And I guess maybe it's my own learning style, but I stressed it in today's episode. I would not worry about time. We can't put time constraints on ourselves when we're just learning a task to begin with. So this is why practicing at home, in the privacy of your own home where nobody can hear you, so you're comfortable to speak out loud, you're going to take as much time as possible, as you need to formulate sort of your ideas as you go. So if you're doing task 4 specifically, like what we did today, I would just start off very simple. Pick one person in the scene, spend a good half hour looking at them, describing, what they're doing. Think of 3 or 4 logical predictions, get your basic vocab out, write it out even before you start to speak it. Some people like to work backwards when they're practicing their speaking. It's a learning style. So if you're more comfortable thinking of your ideas, writing them out on paper and then speaking them out loud, and then repeating that until you can hear the words, you're going to start making connections a lot better through the ideas here to the written word on the page to eventually the speech. So that might be an approach that will help you out for sure. Now, clearly on the actual test, you're not going to have time to write out all your ideas. This is just for practice. But I think once you sort of quicken the connection time and are able to then think of these ideas more quickly, eventually then you stop writing them out. You just start your practice today by picking a new person in the scene, and you see if you can actually generate those ideas by speaking. Yeah, so remember that at the end of the presentation when I was talking about that groundskeeper trimming those shrubs that look like birds, and I sort of rattled out about 4 or 5 different things I think she could do. That's sort of the end, the icing on the cake, if you will, of your practice. If you're just starting out with your practice, I think that would be very difficult. I think it would be unrealistic to expect that you would just look at a scene and boom, 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 boom. Oh, there's all my predictions. That comes from practice, practice, practice. So that's kind of the end result. But do it step by step. Pick one idea first. Make sure that makes sense. When that's finished, put it away for the day. Maybe come back the next day when you're refreshed. Don't overload yourself either. So anyway, I hope that helps. It's speaking's tough for even first language speakers, right? Like it takes a lot of practice to be comfortable speaking aloud. And this is a big, heavy test that you're doing. It's important. So we're nervous to begin with. So yeah, take all the time you need at home and scaffold it step by step, and it will hopefully become more comfortable as you go.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brandi. And I think we have one circling back to the speaking test earlier. Someone asked if you can suggest an alternative conclusion statement.
Oh, instead of like, it's a busy day at the park today. Maybe something, maybe future would be better. Like hopefully everyone will enjoy themselves today. That's probably even better because you're trying in the future. So just kind of whatever comes to mind, Tomorrow might be another busy day at the park or something to that effect. So you're just sort of adding in whatever comes to mind. I know conclusions seem easy, but they're actually not, are they? Like even me, I'm sitting here trying to think because we focus so much on the content of our response that by the time we get to the end, we think, I've said it all. What more is there to say? But yeah, the whole purpose of that little tiny conclusion is really just to signal the listener, I'm done. I've got no more to say. So as long as you're adding in something to signify that, I think you're okay. Your score is based on basically the predictions you're making. So that's more important.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Brandi. And then this is also something relating to what you talked about regarding describing the clothes people are wearing earlier too. Someone made a comment that we could add the dress code while structuring the sentence.
Yeah, you could in a sense too. Do you mean for the two workers, like employees at the park, maybe? Like dress code? Is that what you mean?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Again, those are the two easiest people to draw that in because they are actually in uniform. Like it's obvious that they're wearing a uniform, so that might be something to add. And again, when you're identifying the person, you don't want to spend too much time doing that. Just pick and choose a couple details that make it clear that's the one I'm talking about, because you want to focus more of your time on the future. But yeah, like it's sort of up to you. You're in control of what you want to talk about. So maybe that's reassuring for this test. There's no rule that says you have to talk about this person here and you have to say their age and you have to get their clothing. It's completely up to you. There are thousands of ways to approach this task. But just pick and choose a few things that make sense. Yeah. Like the two young children in the center of the park. As soon as we say that, everybody knows who we're talking about. So we can move on to the future action. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandi. Just looking at some of the other comments here. Someone also wanted to know if you could let us know what the key is for listening part of the test.
Key for the listening. I'm not too sure what you mean, to be honest, CELPIP. If you wanted to be more specific about what you mean by key, I don't mind talking about the listening test briefly, even though today's episode was on speaking. If you're asking sort of how do we do well with listening, maybe that's what it's meant by key, like what's the main focus. I would say we want to get really practice at note-taking. We have lots of episodes from the past. CELPIP Live has been on air for 2 years. And I know we've got our playlists also organized on this channel. So if you go back to the listening playlist, you will find some note-taking episodes. So understanding as you're listening, being able to identify the important words that the person's talking about. It's usually the 5 W's. So there might be a who, what, where, when, why. If you can jot down those words as the person's talking about them, and then using the notes you've made, you'll be able to more easily look at the answers that come next and answer them. So that's a very sort of general overview of the listening test, but that's definitely one of the best ways to get familiar, because you can apply that strategy to all 6 parts, whether it's part 1 to part 6. Note-taking is key, I think, because most of us hear so much information, we're not going to remember all the details unless we write them down, right? So I think that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So they clarified what they meant was to avoid, how to avoid the silly mistakes in listening.
Yeah, I'd say same answer. Again, if you're taking very clear-cut notes and you clearly identify the who, what, where, when, why, those are the main parts of any conversation that you're listening to. So at least if you're focusing on that, it should push you with a lot more efficiency towards the right answer, for sure. Yeah, we haven't done listening in ages. Now that you've got me thinking there, Franco, we spent a lot of time with the speaking, which is fine. Maybe we should do another episode on listening in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. And yeah, another question we have is how can we improve vocabulary?
Vocabulary, I would say, first and foremost, is by reading. Find something you enjoy reading. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a comic book. It could be a novel. It could be an online news article. Doesn't matter. Pick something you enjoy, first of all, because then you're invested and able to focus. With your daily reading, this is not something you do once and now you know it. Daily reading in English, I would say minimum 15 minutes a day, up to even a half hour a day if you can make that work for your schedule, whether it's in the morning, after work, before bed, doesn't matter. But work that into your regular routine. Take note of, I encourage test takers to take 2 or even 3 new words a day that they encounter and add them to a journal. I do this when I read too. I love to read. And even though I've been teaching for a long time, so my vocabulary is quite well developed, I'm always learning new words. That's the whole fun of reading, because we're being exposed to new ideas, right? So I don't keep a journal myself anymore, but I do note that down. I use an electronic reader. My electronic reader is called a Kobo. And what that does is, as I'm reading away, if there's a new word I don't know, first I try to guess what it means, because that's how you become a good reader. I look at the other words in the sentence and I try to guess what that word means based on the other ideas. And then if I just hold my finger on that new word, an online dictionary definition pops up and briefly tells me what that word means. So I just note that in my own mind. Some of us learning the language, though, if it's an additional language, you'll want to write that new word out. Yeah, so write the word down. I wouldn't copy a dictionary definition, because those are not your words. You're probably not going to remember that. But if you can read the definition and understand it in your own words, that's what you want to write down. Write down other words that mean the same as that new word. That's how you're making connections. We learn by adding information to something we already know. So again, if that word means the same as this one and you already know what that word means, it's now a memory game. Oh, okay. Scared just means the same as startled. It's sort of a synonym. So next time I see the word startled, I'll just remember that that man is afraid. So there's 3 words that mean the same. So it's a very long process, depending on how long you've already been studying English to begin with. But yeah, and reviewing, that's the thing that we forget to do. You don't just write it down and put that book away and never look at it again, right? We review those words on a regular basis and we productively produce them. So if you try to work those new vocabulary words into your speech, whether it's a practice question for the CELPIP test or just in your daily conversations with friends and family, or if you're keeping a journal or writing something down, try to use those new vocabulary words. Once you've used them a few times correctly, it starts to sort of embed itself into your memory bank, I like to call it. Like we all have our own little memories back here. And there is a limit to how much we can remember. But if you add just a little bit each day, you're going to build up that bank. And over lots of time, you'll have many more words at your disposal. That's a very long, I get excited when I talk about reading it. You can tell, because I love to read. But that's a very long-winded answer to your question. But yeah, vocab starts with reading, and it starts with you keeping track of the words and producing them. That is the best way to develop vocab. It'll take probably months and months to really get an elevated vocab. This is not something you do 2 weeks before your test and expect to have a flawless vocabulary to move forward. It does take a lot of time, as you all, I'm sure, already know, right? All of us who speak multiple languages. It's a patience game, it takes time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I also have an electronic reader, and I will definitely take your advice into consideration. I always just kind of skip through it, but I definitely like the idea of, figuring out vocabulary that way. That's really smart.
Yeah, it depends why you read. Like I read for pleasure, so I'm not worried about time. Like if I'm interested, I'm sincerely curious. I look, I say, oh, I have no idea. I've never heard that word, but that's kind of neat. So, and then you come across it again, and the next time you see it, you go, oh, I saw that 2 weeks ago. I kind of remember what that means now. And yeah, so try that out and see what is your electronic reader, Kimsa? Mine's a Kobo.
I have a Kindle.
You have a Kindle. Okay, yeah. I don't know if all of our listeners are familiar. Like that's just the name brand. Like Kobo is a name brand. Kindle. What are some others? Anyway, I don't know if they're different around the world, but yeah, they're just electronic readers. It looks like it's about this big, little square, right? And it's computerized. Yeah. I don't have mine handy right now, but that's maybe a small investment if you've got a birthday coming up. Get someone to buy you an e-reader, and it's an easy way to start learning your vocab, I think.
I actually have mine right here. It's just really small.
Yeah, it's just like a little toy. And it's lightweight, so you can bring it with you anywhere. I always have mine in my purse. So if I'm running errands and I just want to stop for a cold drink or a coffee, I've got my book. I can read, right? So yeah, take it with you and squeeze in your reading when you can.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're circling back to the speaking task now, and someone asked if you could help us with how to start an introduction.
Yeah, your introduction completely depends on the task that you're actually answering on the test. So for speaking task 4 that we did today, you don't really need an introduction at all. You just sort of start with, you pick the person you're going to talk about first. I think that's what we did today, didn't we? We just said, the young woman at the back of the park in the red shirt. So for task 4, you don't really need that introduction because you're making all those predictions. Let's backtrack it to task 3 for speaking. Task 3 gives you actually the same picture that you look at in task 4, but this time you're asked to describe what's happening now, not future, now. That one you will need a small introduction for. You'd want to give just an overview of the scene first before you get into the action. So if we were looking at our picture today that we did, if it was task 3, I'd probably say something to the effect of, I'm looking at a picture with many community members enjoying their day out at a busy park. So you're kind of giving that introductory overview, and then you start picking your people and talking about what they're doing. So it all really depends on the task at hand. And again, we've got lots of episodes on speaking on our playlist. So if you want to go back and listen and just even look at how we started each one, it will give you some ideas to get started. But yeah, introducing it is usually key to set yourself up for success later on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Brandi. I think that's all the time we have for today for questions. So once again, thank you so much for your presentation, Brandi. That was so helpful. And we're really happy that you joined us for the first episode of season 4.
It's fun to be back with season 4, and it's wonderful to have you as our host this season, Kimsa. So thanks. It was a lot of fun to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. All right, and that's it for today. Of course, I haven't forgotten our trivia question yet. So, do you know what the highest temperature Canada ever recorded is? And the answer is 121 degrees Fahrenheit, which is equivalent to 49.6 degrees Celsius. Wow, so I actually think that's higher than any of the guesses we had today. That is a really high number. So remember to stay hydrated, stay cool. But yes, once again, thank you so much for joining us today and subscribing to our channel. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone you might anyone that you think would find this helpful. Our next episode will be on Tuesday, August 9th. It is an immigration episode with Kenna Dim, so do come back to check it out. If you have any questions you can get answered today, please comment below and we can address it in our next episode as well. And of course, please feel free to suggest any topics you would like to see on our show, anything you'd like to learn about the test or anything at all. We're always happy to hear your suggestions. And as always, please do connect with us through any of our social media channels. All of the updates that we have will be posted there first, so don't forget to follow us. And then, yeah, thank you so much for everything. Until our next episode, please stay safe, stay hydrated, stay cool, and have a nice day. Bye, everyone.